Hi everyone. Today I'm looking at the moments where everyday life took the darkest possible turn.
From a woman simply enjoying a walk when a massive icicle came crashing down to a traveler tumbling hundreds of feet down the mountains, ending the investigation in one of the most disturbing cases ever. It was February 5th, 2014, and soft snow covered the streets of St. Petersburg, Russia. Snow rested on people's heavy coats as they hurried through the city for their daily schedules. Wilhelmina Hartley was 29 years old and worked as an assistant at a fashion company in Manchester, England. She spent her days answering emails, helping designers, and arranging meetings. Her job kept her busy from morning until evening, and she often came home too tired to enjoy life. Visiting St. Petersburg had been her dream since she was a teenager. She had read books about the city, watched travel videos, and filled her phone with pictures of the Winter Palace and snowy streets. She believed leaving work behind for 2 weeks would help her feel like herself again. Wilhelmina often told her boyfriend Frederick that she needed the holiday more than anyone understood. She had lost her mother a year earlier after a long illness, and she had buried herself in work instead of dealing with the pain. Frederick worried about her because she hardly smiled anymore. He believed the trip would help her breathe again, so they planned everything together. Every place they visited made Wilhelmina happier. She laughed more than she had in months and told Frederick she wished time would slow down. By the second week, they had visited museums, parks, busy markets, and famous streets. They tried local food, watched the snowfall, and talked about returning someday. Their flight home was the next morning, and Wilhelmina knew work would soon begin again. Wanting to make the most of her final day, she hoped to enjoy every moment she had left.
That morning, heavy snow covered much of the city. Frederick decided to stay at the hotel to finish packing, check their travel documents, and rest before the long journey home.
Wilhelmina told him she only wanted one last walk to remember the city before they left. I understand that feeling when you're leaving somewhere that saved you. You want to squeeze every drop from it, freeze the moment before it disappears. The streets were already busy, with people going to work, tourists taking pictures, and shop owners clearing snow from the front of their stores. Wilhelmina walked slowly, stopping often to admire the old buildings covered with snow. She took several photographs with her phone and quietly looked around, trying to remember every small detail because she did not know if she would ever return.
I've noticed that people who have lost someone often become hyper aware of details. They want to catalog everything because they've learned how quickly things can vanish.
As Wilhelmina continued along one of the older streets, she walked beneath a building with thick snow resting along the edge of its roof. Long icicles hung above the sidewalk, but she never noticed them. People continued walking beneath the building because no temporary barriers had been placed along the sidewalk, and the danger was not obvious from the ground. Without warning, one of the largest icicles broke loose. It fell several floors in only seconds, and while Wilhelmina was passing through, it unfortunately struck Wilhelmina on the head. It was so fast that no one could shout a warning of any kind. The weight and shock from the hit made her collapse onto the snow. Pedestrians, seeing what just happened, ran toward her in shock. Several people called emergency services while others stayed beside her until paramedics arrived. Medical crews reached the scene within minutes and found Wilhelmina with a severe head injury. She was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors worked to save her, but the damage was too serious. Frederick was contacted at the hotel and rushed to the hospital, only to learn that Wilhelmina had died a short time later despite every effort to keep her alive. The trip they had planned together ended in tragedy just hours before they were supposed to fly home. Police closed part of the street while investigators examined the building. They concluded that a brief rise in temperature, combined with the weight of fresh snow, had loosened the icicle from the roof.
What gets me about Wilhelmina is that she was conscious and present for almost the entire trip. And then, in her last moments, she wasn't fully there at all. Sometimes the real danger isn't the place we're visiting, it's the transition.
This person I'm about to tell you about didn't go anywhere. He stayed in the only home he'd ever known, and it turned against him. It was August 11th, 2022, and the warm morning sun shone across a quiet street in Columbus, Ohio. Birds could be heard from nearby trees as neighbors started another peaceful Thursday. Thaddeus Waters was 44 years old and had lived alone in the same small house for almost 15 years. He worked as the manager of a local cafe, and that Thursday was his day off. A week earlier, friends and neighbors had surprised him with a small birthday celebration for his 44th birthday. They laughed together, shared food, and wished him many more happy years. Nobody knew it would be the last birthday he would ever celebrate. Thaddeus was known by almost everyone on the street. He greeted people every morning, helped older neighbors carry heavy bags, and often checked on anyone who looked lonely. Children waved whenever they saw him because he always smiled back. Even after long hours at work, he still found time to help others. People trusted him because he was kind, calm, and always ready to listen. And he rarely ever complained about anything. For the past 2 years, Thaddeus had been living with cancer. Treatments had become harder, and he knew he did not have much time left. Even so, he refused to let the illness control his life. Friends begged him many times to move into an assisted living home where people could look after him every day, but Thaddeus always refused. He said his little house was filled with memories, and he wanted to stay where he felt at peace for whatever time he had left.
I've seen terminally ill people fight to keep control. Thaddeus wasn't being selfish. He was holding on to his dignity and independence.
Although Thaddeus knew every corner of the house, the illness and some of his medicine had weakened his sense of smell and often left him tired and forgetful. His neighbors worried about him, but they respected his choice to remain independent since nothing serious had ever happened before that day. That Thursday morning, Thaddeus returned home after buying groceries about 3 blocks away. He carried the bags inside, placed the fresh food in the refrigerator, and stacked the rest inside the kitchen cupboards. Afterward, he sat down in his favorite chair by the window to rest. Outside, the street stayed calm as neighbors carried on with their day, unaware that natural gas had been slowly leaking into the house through a damaged natural gas line connected to the kitchen stove for many hours. Because his sense of smell had been weakened by his illness and treatment, he never noticed the odor that would normally have warned him about the leak. One of the cruelest things about accidents is that sometimes they're already in motion before anyone could possibly stop them. Minutes later, the refrigerator compressor clicked on like it always did. A tiny electrical spark met the gas that had built up quietly inside the home, and the house exploded outward within seconds, hurling wood, bricks, glass, and broken furniture nearly 30 feet into nearby yards, shaking windows on both sides of the street, cracking a neighbor's fence, and setting off car alarms up the block. Neighbors rushed outside in shock, some shouting Thaddeus's name, hoping he had somehow escaped. Others called emergency services right away, while a few tried getting closer to the burning wreckage, only to be pushed back by the intense heat and dark smoke that filled the morning sky. Firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and gas company workers arrived within minutes of the call. Dark smoke covered the area as crews carefully dug through the collapsed remains of the house, calling out in case anyone could still answer. After nearly 3 hours, they found Thaddeus buried beneath the wreckage near what used to be his kitchen. He had suffered fatal injuries in the blast and was pronounced dead at the scene.
In the days after, investigators examined the ruined home closely. Piece by piece, they concluded the damaged natural gas line had allowed gas to build up for many hours before it was most likely ignited by the refrigerator compressor.
His last day had started like any other, but it ended in a loss nobody on that street would ever forget. Thaddeus was good to everyone around him, and they loved him for it. But in the end, that kindness worked against him because nobody felt comfortable insisting he accept help. The next story is about one who spent her life looking through a camera lens at beautiful moments, and for just a few seconds, she forgot to look at what was actually there. It was September 23rd, 2017, and the evening sun covered Praia do Norte in Nazaré, Portugal, with a warm golden light as waves rolled in from the Atlantic. Ottolin Fairweather was 27 years old. She had British parents but grew up in Lyon, France. She loved traveling more than anything and had turned that love into her full-time job. She was a social media creator who shared videos and photos from beaches around the world. Thousands of people followed her because they loved seeing new places through her eyes. Ottoline believed every trip should leave people smiling and always said life was too short to stay in one place. A few months earlier, her boyfriend, Julian, had asked her to marry him during a quiet walk beside a lake near their home. They had talked for years about seeing the world before settling down and starting a family. This trip to Portugal was another step toward that dream. They laughed through long train rides and always found joy in the little moments. The beach in Portugal was one Ottolin had wanted to visit for years. She had seen videos of its famous waves and beautiful coastline and knew many people came there to watch the sea from a safe distance. Earlier that day, she and Julianne had explored the coastline and watched experienced surfers, while rescued jet skis worked offshore. They even stopped to take pictures with local lifeguards for her socials. Her followers quickly filled the comments with hearts and excited messages.
I think about people who build their lives creating moments for others. When you live behind a camera, every moment becomes a performance.
As the hours passed, the beach slowly became quieter. Families packed their bags while photographers waited for the sunset. Ottolin wanted those last golden pictures before leaving. She stood beside Julianne as they watched the sky change into soft shades of orange and pink. The light reflected on the water and made everything look calm. She took dozens of pictures, laughing every time Julianne made a funny face behind her. They hugged, talked about dinner, and agreed it had been one of their best trips together. Then she had another idea. She told Julian it would be funny to take a few more pictures with ice cream on their lips before they left, because her followers loved playful moments. Julian smiled and went to a nearby shop to buy 2 ice creams. Ottolin stayed behind with her camera bag and phone, looking at the waves and thinking one more selfie from the rocks near the shoreline would complete the day.
One thing I've always noticed is that people rarely make one big mistake. They make small, harmless decisions that eventually lead them to the wrong place.
She walked onto the wet rocks near the water's edge while holding her phone in front of her. The smaller waves washed onto the rocks and pulled back, making the shoreline look calmer for a brief moment.
For a few seconds, it looked safe enough to step closer without realizing how quickly the ocean could change.
Other people nearby were taking pictures too. Ottolin smiled into the camera and lifted her chin toward the sunset. She never noticed a much larger set wave building farther out in the Atlantic. It rushed toward the shore much faster than the others. Before anyone could shout a warning, the wave crashed over the rocks, knocked her off her feet, and dragged her into the cold Atlantic Ocean. People screamed and pointed toward the water. Julian came running back with the ice creams still in his hands, but they fell into the sand as soon as he saw the crowd. He called Ottolin's name again and again while racing toward the shoreline. Lifeguards and rescue crews rushed into action within moments, using rescue jet skis and searching from the shoreline. But the powerful waves and strong currents prevented rescuers from reaching her in time. Despite every effort, Ottolin was swept beyond their reach before they could bring her back to shore. Julien remained at the shoreline for hours, hoping rescuers would find her alive. But as daylight faded, the search was suspended until the following morning. Search teams continued combing the coastline over the next several days before Ottolin's body was eventually found washed ashore several miles away. Authorities later confirmed that she had died from accidental drowning after being swept into the powerful surf. Investigators determined that she had entered a dangerous rocky area near the shoreline where the incoming waves were far more powerful than they appeared from land, bringing the search to a heartbreaking end. The next person I'm going to tell you about walked through a place he'd walked 1,000 times, and this time the place decided to stop tolerating his presence. It was October 12th, 2016, and the afternoon was quiet in a public park in the Netherlands. The air was cool, The trees stood still, and nothing looked dangerous as people enjoyed a peaceful day outside. Bartholomew Ashcombe was 47 years old and worked as a warehouse supervisor. His job was hard on his body. For many weeks, he worked long shifts, sometimes during the day and sometimes through the night, checking deliveries and making sure everything was ready before the next shift. He lived alone in a small apartment and had never married. His life was simple, always work and home. The only soul waiting for him every day was his old golden retriever. To Bartholomew, his dog was more than a pet. He was family, his closest friend, and the reason the apartment never felt completely empty. Every day, Bartholomew and his dog walked together through the same park, either before work or right after returning home from a night shift. On weekends, when he was off work, they usually went whenever they felt like it. The walks helped Bartholomew stretch his stiff legs and made him feel younger than his age. He liked listening to music through one earpiece, leaving the other ear free to hear what was happening around him. It made the quiet paths feel alive and helped him forget the long hours at work.
The neighbors knew exactly when he would pass because they often saw him following the same route.
He rarely visited anyone and seldom spoke unless someone greeted him first. When you stop fully paying attention to a place because you've been there so many times, you're making a bet that nothing will change. And that's a bet the universe doesn't always let you win. The previous night, Bartholomew finished a long shift and arrived home exhausted. Instead of taking his dog for their usual walk, he went straight to bed. Confused, the dog waited by the front door for hours before pacing between the bedroom and the entrance. By afternoon, he had grown restless, barking, nudging Bartholomew awake, and carrying his leash across the room. Smiling, Bartholomew rubbed the dog's ears. With the weekend finally here, there was no reason to rush. He put on his walking shoes, clipped on the leash, slipped one earpiece into his ear, and headed toward their favorite park. The park was unusually quiet that afternoon. Their trail led through a more secluded section lined with tall, aging trees where few people passed by. Still tired from work, Bartholomew walked slowly as his dog happily sniffed the grass, making the most of the walk he had been waiting for all day.
The truth is, when you're exhausted, your instinct is to retreat from discomfort, but that exhaustion also makes you less aware of actual danger.
As Bartholomew followed the path, the music in his one earpiece made it harder to notice everything around him. His dog pulled gently on the leash, excited by every new smell. Without warning, a loud crack echoed through the park. Before Bartholomew could react, a massive section of an old tree snapped and slammed into him, knocking him off the walking path and down into a deep roadside drainage ditch hidden by thick brush. The fallen trunk crashed in after him, pinning his lower body beneath its weight. Winded and badly injured, Bartholomew tried to call for help, but his voice barely carried beyond the ditch. His dog barked frantically and paced along the edge, refusing to leave him. Hours passed before nearby residents noticed the dog barking non-stop in the same spot. Concerned, they walked over to investigate and looked down into the drainage ditch, where they finally spotted Bartholomew trapped beneath the tree. Emergency crews rushed to free him, but he had suffered catastrophic crush injuries and severe internal bleeding. He was pronounced dead shortly after rescuers reached him. Investigators later ruled the death an accidental crushing caused by the unexpected failure of a large, decaying tree during strong winds. Following the investigation, city officials removed the remaining unstable sections of the tree and inspected other aging trees along the walking path, while the drainage ditch was cleared to improve visibility for future emergencies. Bartholomew's dog was safely recovered at the scene and later taken in by his family, having refused to leave the edge of the ditch until rescuers arrived. The last case is about someone who spent an entire trip trying to find herself in new places, and by the end of it, she was just falling. On September 25th, 2019, it was a cold morning in Germany, and people walked through the streets. The air was fresh, the ground covered with dew, and she hoped this trip would help her clear her mind. Lavinia Vandenberg was a 24-year-old master's student from Canada who had always worked hard for the future she wanted. Since she was young, she believed education could help her build a better life. She spent years studying and pushing herself because she wanted to make her family proud. But the past few months had been difficult, with new opportunities searched for, applications sent, and good news that never seemed to come. 2 weeks before her trip, Lavinia had applied for several jobs, and during her journey, she received another rejection message. The trip was supposed to give Lavinia a chance to rest. She wanted to explore museums, wander unfamiliar streets, take photographs, and enjoy a break from school and the pressure she had been carrying. She always kept a small notebook where she wrote down memorable moments from her travels. Before leaving for Germany, Lavinia had recently ended her relationship with her high school boyfriend Daniel. They still cared about each other, but realized their lives were moving in different directions. Daniel encouraged her to take the trip, hoping the change of scenery would help her clear her mind.
Let me tell you this sincerely. Disappointment has a way to it that other people can't always see. It's not visible the way a limp is visible, but it affects everything you do.
That morning, Lavinia woke early and watched people begin their day outside her window. For a moment, everything felt peaceful until a new rejection email appeared on her phone. She spent the day sightseeing and taking photos, but remained distracted, carrying worries no one else could see. Later, she traveled to a popular mountain in central Germany, known for its forests, hiking trails, and scenic viewpoints. Hoping to clear her mind, she joined other visitors, enjoying the marked trails and breathtaking views. Lavinia walked slowly along the trail, taking pictures and writing a few notes in her notebook, just as other visitors did. She eventually reached a viewpoint overlooking mountains and forests stretching far into the distance. The vista was exactly as beautiful as the travel guides had promised. She stood there for several minutes, breathing in the cool mountain air as she admired the landscape. There's something about standing before a vast landscape that makes grief feel smaller, even if only for a moment. As Lavinia continued looking out over the valley, a group of teenagers nearby laughed while taking turns posing for photos. They shifted around excitedly, trying different angles without paying much attention to the people around them. One teenager stepped backward while looking at a phone screen, bumped into another friend, and stumbled sideways. The collision accidentally sent them into Lavinia, catching her completely off guard. The unexpected shove knocked her off balance. She instinctively reached for the nearby safety barrier, but missed it by inches. Her footing gave way as loose gravel shifted beneath her shoes, sending her over the edge of the steep embankment. She tumbled down the mountainside, crashing through brush and small trees as rocks and branches scraped against her body. Her fall finally ended when she slammed into a large tree several dozen feet below the viewpoint. Dazed and badly injured, she tried to call for help, but her voice barely carried beyond the dense vegetation. The teenagers immediately realized what had happened and called emergency services, while other visitors rushed to the edge to look for her. Search and rescue teams arrived within minutes, but the steep terrain and thick vegetation made reaching Lavinia extremely difficult. Nearly 2 hours later, rescuers finally reached her and rushed her to a trauma center, but she had suffered catastrophic internal injuries along with severe trauma to her head and spine. She died before reaching the hospital. Investigators later ruled the incident an accidental fall caused by an unintended collision at the crowded viewpoint. They found no evidence of foul play, concluding that the teenager had accidentally knocked Lavinia off balance while stepping backward during the photo session. Following the investigation, park officials reviewed safety measures at the overlook and reminded visitors to remain aware of those around them while taking photographs near steep drop-offs.
Lavinia wanted so badly to find something. Herself, clarity, a reason to believe the future would be different from the rejection she'd been carrying. And I think that's what took her.